Welcome, Cyclone fans, to the latest edition of the Nightcap. I'm your host and child producer, Aiden White, joined by Levi Stevenson. Levi, how's it going?
Stevenson. Good.
Levon Stevenson.
Yeah. So little touch and go there for a while. I was going to be on earlier
Yeah.
today, but we're here and we're ready to go.
A few sketchy chicken tenders later.
Sketchy chicken tenders. Yeah, it's not ideal from a gas station up in northern Iowa. It's not a great way to kick off your afternoon, but it is what it is.
Anyway,
yeah,
let's get into things. Without further ado, Iowa State basketball coaching and baseball legend. People forget. Coach Nate Loenser, how's it going?
Do you become a legend when you shut down a baseball program? Is that how that works?
Hell yeah, man. Not very many people get to do that.
Not only did I shut the program down, apparently, also my high school has been shut down too. So I don't know if that's legendary in some people's eyes, but no, it was very cool though to be a part of the last baseball program at Iowa State. So thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
So I guess we can start with, you went to NU High, Cedar Falls native, correct?
Yeah, born and raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I went to Southdale Elementary, which was the part of the Cedar Falls school system. But for 7th through 12th grade, I went to a high school, Northern University High School in Cedar Falls, which was the lab school for the University of Northern Iowa. All of my siblings went there as well. So it was kind of a cool setup. The whole deal there with UNI being a teaching college was, and it being having so many teachers, they developed this lab school, which there are only a few in the country and very few left in the country. But think of it as, instead of all the student teachers from Northern Iowa or the observers going out in the community, they could essentially just go on campus. So we kind of called ourselves lab rats because we would have, instead of one or two student teachers or observers, we'd have a whole back row of them. So we gave them a tough time, but for us it was normal. Part of the deal was Cedar Falls, and you could only be 10% of the size of Cedar Falls. So if Cedar Falls had a graduating class of 500, then there could be 50 in that class. So it was a pre-K through 12 school. And with me being outside of the district, let's say there were 35 kids that were in my class going into 7th grade. Well, then 15 kids could go to the lab school from there. So very cool school. Played all
was
my
there like an application process or anything?
So it literally was just as simple as soon as you were born, you could be put on the list. And because my older siblings went there, I was put on the list at an early age. And then it was literally just a straight numerical list from there. So it wasn't anything after that. But then after that, if you were selected, it was technically a private school, but it wasn't like it was a big fee or anything like that. It couldn't have been that much. My parents were not that well off, but it was definitely, you being from Gladbrook Rhinebeck, you probably thought we paid thousands of dollars to go there and we were the rich kids there, but it was,
well, to be honest, I don't remember NU High. I mean,
yeah, well, like I said, maybe we were shut down by the time you showed up. So
2012 was the last school year.
There you go. So, and I graduated in 97. So, but anyways, very cool school. Offered a lot of the perks of being in a bigger city, but with a smaller school. I was able to play baseball, basketball, football, and golf. Played all my high school football games in the Unidome. Actually, our high school gym burnt down my freshman year of high school, so got to play basketball my first 2 years at the West Gym at Northern Iowa as well. So, and there's been a lot of cool people that have come through. Trev Alberts, who is our athletic director at the University of Nebraska, went there, graduated with my brother, Annabeth Gish, who was an actress who was in a couple movies like Mystic Pizza and Double Jeopardy and things like that. And then maybe a very, very famous alum that came from NU High was Mike Green, who He works in the sports information department. He was one of the assistant athletic directors at Iowa State now. So obviously that's a name for a lot of Iowa State and Cyclone people. And it's, like I said, very cool school. Grew up there. My parents both went to Iowa State, so we've had season football tickets, or they've had season football tickets since the stadium's been open. They both went to Iowa State. They met at Iowa State. They had season basketball tickets starting in '86. So even when I was in high school, I was spending a lot of weekends or even weekdays going to basketball games. We only had 2 tickets for basketball games at Iowa State, but in the old days, Highway 20 did not connect from Cedar Falls to I-35, so we would make the trek from Cedar Falls to Ames and stop in Eldora, and you talked about your chicken fingers, but we'd stop and maybe get a little Casey's pizza on the way or something like that. And Dad would pick me up from school. We'd go to those games, and then I'd sleep in the car on the way back. So that was pretty typical to make the trek from Cedar Falls to Ames. When I graduated in '97, I decided to go to Iowa State. I went there originally to be a manager for Tim Floyd. Committed to do that the spring of my senior year of high school. So I came in the class with Marcus Pfizer, Martine Rancic. I was 1 year younger than Stevie Johnson. I was technically the same class as Jamal Tinsley, but Tinsley was a
JUCO.
junior college transfer, so he was not there until my junior and senior year of class, so of school. But so I had some ties there. I'm kind of bouncing around, but I'll give you the whole story of how I made from Cedar Falls to Ames. But as you guys know, baseball is in the summertime in Iowa. So even though I committed to be a manager for Coach Floyd, I had a pretty big senior year of baseball. And
yeah, I got your batting average up here.
What do you got? Let's see if you're right or not.
596.
596
with 60 stolen bases.
That's cooking. Ricky Henderson over here. Look at that.
The record will never be broken because the school is no longer.
Yeah, that's right.
Because per Wikipedia, everything but the athletic wing has been demolished. So
yeah, so I did, and I actually took a picture of the actual record board, so I have that at least for now to make sure it's there. I mean, the school at NU has actually been leveled now, and it's tennis courts, and even the gym has turned into an ROTC.
Rec center.
Yeah, so anyways, but yeah, I stole 60 bases that year, and I was 60 for 63. And actually one of the throwouts was against Gladbrook Rhinebeck, so I'll never forget.
Sorry.
Get a GR, guys. So what was funny that year is I was 30 for 30 to start the year, and the first time I was thrown out was against Dyke New Hartford, and I wasn't too happy about that. So the next time we played them, I stole 5 bases in the next game, and we played them in districts, and I was still mad. And I led off the game with a walk, and then I stole second, third, and home to start the game in a district game. So
you really were trying to do your best Ricky Henderson impression.
I definitely Ricky Henderson, definitely not Vince Coleman. So growing up a Cubs fan, I didn't mess with Cardinals. So yes, Ricky Henderson was my guy I was trying to be. So
I'm a Cardinals fan. So
sorry, well, we can get over that at some point. So anyways, kind of. Tried out. I had this big year of high school baseball, but I still was committed to go to Iowa State, was going to be a manager. I think I took Marcus Pfizer to get his school ID at Iowa State as a manager. So, but after a couple months, I realized that I still felt like I had some juice left in the tank. So stopped being that. Went back to Cedar Falls after the school year, started coaching some high school baseball there, but mostly so that way I could have access to a batting cage and a pitching machine. So kind of trained that summer and tried out for the Iowa State baseball team my sophomore year. Did not make the team, but met some good friends and some good acquaintances that played in a wooden bat league in Cedar Rapids. And that next summer, I was coaching again in Cedar Falls, but then I started playing in this wooden bat semi-pro league. I played for Williamsburg, and it was against a bunch of people like Cedar Rapids, Norway, things like that. And 2 years later, I'm playing pickup basketball at Iowa State at the Lead Rec Center, and the new hitting coach sees me playing basketball, and he kind of stops and stares at me. And I'm like, geez Louise, what is this guy? I mean, he's almost like kind of checking me out and staring me down. Now, keep in mind, I hit a double off of him in the summertime, and the next time up, he plunked me. So I'm like, well, what is this guy's deal? Is he still angry at this? Well, as it turns out, a couple days later, one of my best friends, Spencer Allen, who played on the last baseball team, who was the head baseball coach at Northwestern. We lived on the same dorm floor, and he said, "No, dude, Evie loves you. He just wants to, he was just kind of checking out." I'm like, "Well, he can come up and say hello." Well, as fate would have it, 2 days later, I happened to have lunch with Spencer, and Coach Evans was there. It was the Hy-Vee, the one that's refresh me with the ones in Ames, the one more in the middle of town, closer
There's
to
one
campus.
in Lincoln. There's one on the east side by Lincoln Way and Grand, and then there's the other one in West Ames, which is on what's
Yeah,
on
way
Way,
west. Not that one.
It's further
That one's
west,
by Edwards, not that one. The one in the middle of town.
Probably the one by Grand then.
Exactly. So anyways, having lunch there and get to talking to Coach Evans, and then literally a week later, I'm getting ready to play 6 foot and under intramural basketball game. Like I said, still living at Iowa State. Still at Ames. I'm in my 4th year of school, and Coach Evans says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go play an intramural game. Why don't you come up to the Jacobson building?" Because that's where the baseball offices were. And went up there and met with Coach Evans, and he's like, "How many credits are you in? Do you want to play?" I'm like, "Yeah." I go, the guy that cut me is still the same head coach. He's like, "I don't care. We'll figure it out from there." So next day I'm at practice and playing baseball at Iowa State. So then I could keep going and from here. But that's how I got to college. Finished that all out, and we could talk on more about that stuff later. I had one at bat in my college career that was at the University of Northern Iowa. Walked and scored a run, and
Little 6 bases on the way around.
Nope. I didn't steal any bases. So I wish that would have been cool. I did make my debut against the University of Iowa. I pinch ran against them, and growing up an Iowa Stater, Iowa State versus Iowa is a pretty big deal. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that, right?
Against who?
I think I've heard something about that. Yeah,
Exactly. So, but I'm at second base, and pitcher wheels to try and pick me off, and I mean, I was jumping around like a jackrabbit out there trying to get in his head, and I was going to try to steal third, to your point, but I slide back into second base, and the second baseman for Iowa, I get the throw to go into center field, but the guy at second base like lays on me like he's supposed to do, so that way I couldn't take the next base, and I get up like I'm gonna get into a tussle with them and all that fun stuff, because I don't know, about level 15. So, but anyways, cool experience to get to play for Iowa State and get to put that uniform on, just with all those family ties that I had. From there, got into coaching. Couldn't get by that time, by that summer, I was head basketball and baseball coach at NU High in Cedar Falls, but they were talking of closing the school down, so I couldn't get a teaching job. So moved back to Ames, was teaching and coaching in Ames. God, you guys might not have to ask any questions. You want me to just keep going?
Yeah, just keep going.
I'm perfectly content just listening.
Yeah.
We'll just keep going, and you guys can circle back, but afterwards, because there's a lot of
you keep going, man. You just keep going. There's plenty of internet left to go around.
All right, so you'll appreciate this. So I get a teaching job back in Ames. I'm coaching freshman basketball at Ames, and my point guard is a guy named Austin Arnaud. So another Iowa State name.
Yeah.
And then I'm also an assistant baseball coach, and Austin, we bring up as a freshman to pitch. So his varsity debut as a pitcher, as a freshman, I was kind of the pitching coach for Ames High, and I'm telling you, he was lights out as a pitcher. He was like El Duque, if you remember him from
Orlando Hernandez.
from the Yankees.
Did he do the big kick too?
Oh, he had the kick. He would drop down. He could
Fantastic.
go from different angles. All of it.
I always really liked watching him pitch. So.
He was but he made his debut against Atumwa. I'll never forget it. It was like a doubleheader late in the year, and he came in, and it was just Austin had a flair for the moment anyway. So that was pretty cool. But also on that freshman basketball team was a kid named Josh Barnes, and Josh Barnes' dad was Steve Barnes, and Steve Barnes was Larry Eustachi's associate head coach. So when Larry was still at Iowa State, Steve Barnes was obviously at my practices, because we would practice at like 5 a.m. or 7 p.m. because we would get the worst gym times at Ames High. But from that, I could still, he's like, after he watched a few practices, Coach Barnes said, hey, if you want to come to practice. So it worked perfect for me. So I would either practice in the morning, then go teach elementary PE through the day. Actually, I was 3/4 time PE teacher my first year. It was beautiful. So 2 of the days I was done at noon. So I'd go to state gym and play pickup basketball at noontime. So that
three-quarter time PE teacher sounds like the absolute dream.
It was first out of college with no wife, no kids, all that. No, it was
see you later.
3/4 time. I had benefits. It was.
You gave that up to go coach basketball?
It was no. I gave it up to become full time. That's the problem.
Well, that's okay.
That
feels like a mistake.
No, really, in hindsight, it was pretty beautiful. So I was teaching, playing pickup basketball 2 times a week. I mean, it was great. And then I'd go to Iowa State practices at 3, and then if I had a night practice, I'd go to those. So pretty cool. That's when, that would have been like Jake Sullivan, Adam Haluska, Jared Holman,
like
those
2002,
years.
2003-ish.
Yep. Getting towards the end of Larry's.
Jackson Vroman on that team too?
Yes, I believe so. And but getting towards the end of Larry's tenure, because as the season was winding down, Coach Barnes is like, if you'd like to be a GA or something like that for us next year, that would be good. Well, then everything kind of went down with Larry and all his stuff. So obviously that didn't happen that spring. I stayed at Ames the next year, and I got the full-time teaching job. And the school I was teaching out there, the 6th grade teacher was a lady named Karen Hoiberg. So some of these other random tidbits, and I'm playing a little bit to my crowd here, obviously, but it's weird how things have kind of intersected with Ames and Iowa State people quite a bit, at least especially early in my career. So yeah, I can't say that I got to know Fred like that, but obviously got to know his mom. That year I moved up to an assistant varsity spot with Ames, and couple later Cyclones. So we had 369 kids starting. We had Eric Bachhoven, who went to Navy, Alex Thompson, who went to Iowa, then later Iowa State, and then Ross Marsden, who started his career at Iowa State. And then that sophomore year, we actually brought up Austin to play some varsities. So a couple Cyclones that were there as well. After that year, though, Coach Eustachi got the head job at the University of Southern Mississippi. I didn't know if there was a chance or not, but that spring, I called Coach Barnes and just said, look, if you guys have anything available, you kind of gave me a college coaching itch. I always kind of wanted to do it, but if you have anything available, I'd love to have a spot if there is anything. So he goes, well, Larry's at his house. He's still in Ames. He used to live in that house across Edwards, the same house that Tim Floyd lived in, and then Eustachi lived in after that. So I'd go up to Larry's house, just knock on the door, and I have my interview with Coach Eustachi in the driveway in his RV, and that's how I got into college coaching. I knew Coach Eustachi's wife because, and I'm bouncing, but Evan Eustachi, who's Larry's son, he's got 2 kids, but his son I actually student taught as a 2nd grader at Edwards, right? Of course I did, right? So
right, yeah, everything just circles back.
So it just circles. And even when I was at Ames High for baseball, I was doing hitting lessons for his other son, Hayden. So it all just goes.
And we were at the batting cage, and a guy named Hank Aaron walked in.
No, close, but anyway, so Coach just says, I don't have anything for you, but if you want to move to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, sight unseen, sure, go ahead. So I tell my parents I'm going to leave a full-time job and coaching at Ames to go to Hattiesburg sight unseen, go down there, and then within 2 weeks I'm on Coach Eustachy's camps. Get hired to be his director of operations that fall. A couple months after, I was living in a church over the summer in the in the attic of a church, just trying to figure it out. I don't know if you guys know this. A lot of people know that Minnesota's state bird is a mosquito, but the state bird in Mississippi is actually the cockroach. So, like
Fantastic.
literally 9 o'clock at night, if you're in the office, it's like they just come out by the droves. So
Right. Yeah.
I'm young, I'm single, I'm 25, and I worked around the clock, and so I got to know the state bird pretty well while I was down there. But Coach hired me to be director of operations in the fall of 2004. I was making $14,000. I thought I had the world by the tail. It was great. And then we actually, on about December, middle, first or second week of December, one of our assistants decided to quit and actually sent me an email to give to Coach Eustachy. And in doing that, it elevated me to an assistant, because it's a little different. Even though we were in that was the last year of the powerful Conference USA. So Louisville, Marquette.
Was like Marshall back in it back then?
No, that was even out. This is Louisville, Cincinnati.
Yeah, Louisville and Cincinnati.
Marquette.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
This was the last year.
That was the good. That was the really
of the
good
very,
conferences.
very good, yes.
Yeah.
And then in 2005, the next year was when it kind of transferred to Marshall, UTEP, and some of those others. So, anyways, like I said, you guys aren't having to work too hard, but
that's cool. I'm sitting. I'm
fine
I'm
by me.
perfectly fine with sitting here listening to you.
But anyways, so the assistant quits, and we had a short staff. We had Coach Eustachy, Coach Barnes, one other guy who played for Coach at Idaho, and then this other assistant who quit, and then myself. Like, Coach didn't even want to have managers, no GAs, no nothing. So I was literally painting the locker room, helping class checks, doing all the things that these high major groups do, but I was doing from ops person on down. Then I move up into an assistant coach, and now I'm doing third assistant on down. So it was quite an experience. I worked, it felt like 23 out of 24 hours, but really accelerated my learning curve. Stayed with Coach for 5 years after that, so 6 years total, and then moved up to, I just needed kind of a reboot, so I moved up to Spirit Lake, Iowa, and coached high school basketball for 3 years up there. Had an okay experiences with that. The best experience I had with it was actually coaching high school football. I was an assistant football coach up there. I had a lot of fun. Worked with a very, very good high school football coach there, and a good friend of mine. Met my wife up there in Okoboji. She's a Cedar Falls girl as well. But she was up kind of vacationing over the 4th, and I was living up there, and we quickly got married. It was kind of love at first sight, one of those fun things. And then Coach Hoiberg had an opening on his staff, but it was as a GA. So, but I had some connections to it, and I was just like, I had a great defensive foundation from Coach Eustachy, and I wanted to kind of hone my craft, especially offensively. This was coming off of the year, or the Aaron Craft block charge, so against Ohio State that year. So
thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Just timelining it.
Call so bad they changed the rule.
So exactly. So, but what had happened was, what was the domino? I believe Jeff Rudder went to Drake, which allowed Charlie Henry, who was a GA the year before, to go into director of player development role, which opened up a graduate assistant spot. So I went to Iowa State as a 34-year-old GA, with 6 years of Division I experience. But obviously growing up, I didn't have my master's yet. So, and Iowa State was, a school obviously I had a lot of ties to. I had some mutual connections with Fred, and he was really, really innovative, especially then with his offense, and just thought it was a great situation. So that year as a GA, I could work with a lot of the guys, and that year it was Monte Morris and Matt Thomas were freshmen. Naz Long and George Niang were sophomores. Melvin Edgem was a senior, and we had Abdul Nader sitting out. So, and we had just got DeAndre Kane as a transfer. And as it would work out, I did a lot of workouts for those guys, and that was great to work with those guys, develop some great relationships with them. Obviously, had a lot of fun with those guys. Won a Big 12 tournament championship, and obviously, if George doesn't break his foot in that first game, there's no telling what that team could have done, because it really had. We were dangerous in a lot of ways. So
tell you what that team could have done.
that we were hard to guard, and we just had some good parts to it too. Even with guys like Dustin Hogue, just had guys that understood their role and things like that just really fit together nicely. So then
what was it like watching DeAndre Kane mentor Monte Morris throughout the whole season?
Yeah, there's a couple things with that. So DeAndre was actually, I knew who DeAndre was because, going back to your Marshall reference, my last year in 2010 at Southern Miss, DeAndre was actually sitting out for Marshall. He actually came, I believe, from the same prep school as Hassan Whiteside, if you know that name, who's in the NBA. So anyways, but Hassan was playing. I think DeAndre was sitting out, so I kind of knew who the guy was. Obviously, I move away, don't follow it quite the same way, but we had Monte, I mean, was a very green freshman. I mean, he's never, even now, it's not like he's this girthy guy, right? But he's, as a incoming freshman, he was, I mean,
he looked like a kid.
He looked like a kid. And we had not only DeAndre coming in that summer, but Bubu Paulo too throughout the summer. Was actually with the team and was doing a lot and had a really good summer, because he was still kind of practicing with that squad quite a bit. And then obviously some of the legal stuff came out in the fall, but there was a time when, like, Monte was really struggling because DeAndre's every bit of 6'5" and is older than him, and
just a dude.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot for really good freshmen. Monte was one of those that had a ceiling that had to go with it too. I mean, there was some projecting with him, and Matt Thomas in a lot of ways was the same way too. I mean, I don't care how good you are, especially in high school, it's a jump. And as things would work themselves out, DeAndre with Monte DeAndre was able to lessen the load of all the ball handling, especially that first year. And I give Monte a lot of credit too, because he allowed DeAndre to do some of that. Matt and Naz kind of filled their role. It was kind of like which one was going to get it really going. And Naz just hit some absolute bombs, obviously, that year, especially against Oklahoma State, which really solidified his lore and all that. But it also helped then Monte even the next year, because obviously George's ability to play make and things like that, and Fred's innovation with Royce a couple years before, and then going into George, the inverting the offense and flipping things like that. If Monte would not have worked on his ability to play off the ball, which he really did those first couple of years, that may not have worked. But as it happened, I mean, now all of a sudden you have two main threats. I remember, especially that second year, we go to West Virginia, and they were really, really good, and we had a heck of a battle there. And when you have two guys like that can, go against Press Virginia and all that, and then even throw Abdul Nader, he had a wonderful game at West Virginia that year. You get those multi-handlers, but also those multi-handlers that understand how to play with or off of each other. I give Monte a lot of credit, because, I mean, coming in as a true point guard and learning how to play off the ball and understanding Fred's spacing and all that, that's what's kind of propelled him in a lot of ways, because what has he had in Denver? He's played with the MVP the last 2 years with Jokic, and obviously, Jokic is such a special talent that Monte, they work really well together. And with Jamal being out this past year, Monte and Jokic are really had a good chemistry and all that. So anyways, that's kind of Monte as a freshman at Iowa State.
and kind of buried in that team too. Well, not buried at all, but like part of that team too, where you had the playmakers all over the place. But then you had kind of your junkyard dogs, Dustin Hogue, Melvin Edgem, like super talented rebounders that just did everything that you wanted them to do. Yeah.
Well, that first year, because Melvin obviously was not there the second year. That would have been Jamil. Right. But that first year, Melvin, I mean, I know you guys remember, but I mean, he was Big 12 Player of the Year. And then Joel Embiid and Andrew Wiggins and Miles
That season
Turner.
was my senior year at Iowa State, so I was lucky enough to actually be there in the stands.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you, I mean, you lived that. I mean, the guy scores 48 points against TCU and felt like 24 of them were dunks, right?
At least. So, I mean, I would say probably, there had to have been 20 that was at least was just on alley-oops alone.
and of all those guys, you know, in that time period, in that era, and a lot of those guys that, you know, that Fred coached, I mean, think about all those guys that did play in the NBA, even going to before I was there with the Babs and Royce and stuff like that. But Melvin, unbelievably, is one that didn't get a chance, but is obviously done very well for himself for his pro career and all those things as well. So there was it was a cool time to be a part of that, and I give Fred a lot of credit too, just for his ability to, you know, he was the transfer guy before all the transfers. Now, I think there's a little misconception. It's not like we always had transfers. I mean, it started that way before I was there when they did decide to bring in, what was it, Chris Allen, Booker.
The first one there was Jake Anderson from Northern Illinois, who was part of that first one. And then you had the Royce White, Chris Babb, Chris Allen, Will Clyburn, stuff like that.
But really, when I first got there, I mean, Monte, Matt, Thomas, Naz, George, Melvin, the core of that was all 4-year guys. And then
the core was still guys that came to Iowa State as freshmen.
Yep. And then you added DeAndre Kane to it and Dustin Hogue. And then the next year, obviously Jamil was a transfer, and we had Abduls and out. Yep. So it was kind of a mix of both. But I think, you know, Fred's job to mix and match a lot of those guys. It wasn't a lot of college teams that were doing that, especially in that day and age, and that obviously played a lot to his NBA experiences and things like that, and the rest has kind of been history.
Yeah, I've gotten news that Aiden he's frozen solid.
I see. Yeah,
his computer froze up entirely. I think he's working on it right now.
Yeah, but it's just me and you now for a little bit. That's fine.
That's all right. No, I wanted to kind of talk about that whole thing, because, you know, that first season you were there, there were so many interesting dynamics that whole season, because you had Matt Thomas, you had these freshmen coming in that were, you know, some of them really highly rated, and you had early one, and Matt Thomas is kind of struggling to shoot the ball a little bit to start the season, and eventually kind of got it going a little bit. The Nat Long hits those big ones, and you have this, you know, it's simultaneously led by, you know, seniors and high level guys and freshmen, and not like a lot in between. And then you have the comeback wins, and then some dominating wins, and it was such an interesting season.
Yeah, there was a lot of parts. I mean, that summer when I first got there and got to Ames, I mean, Sharon Dorsey Walker too was a guy that really was neck and neck with Naz and Matt a lot, especially I would say over that summer as well. So and was obviously
the legendary Cap City performance, where he put out 70 something points or something like that.
Yeah, but he could really get it going. I think, you know, it plays a little bit, and now that I've probably been in the NBA too, I understand, like, in some ways it's, you know, it's hard when 3 guys might be similar too, because no one then can really get in a rhythm, and then it becomes tough and it's fair. And I think ultimately we settled on Matt and Naz and needed those guys, and they both had their moments, especially early. But I mean, even the other thing that was wild about that year too is, I mean, people forget we ran the table in the non-conference as well, and had, I mean, a heck of a win at BYU in a very hostile environment.
That BYU win is another one for the legend. That was another legendary one.
I mean, you could do a whole podcast just on that game alone. I mean, just from the DeAndre poking Mika or whatever in the eyes.
Dustin Hogue
And,
kicking some dude in the chest. Or no, that was West
no,
Virginia.
that was
No, that was
West
West
Virginia.
Virginia.
That's like
The legendary
don't put
kick
those
in the
together.
chest.
Melvin got kicked out of that game.
Yeah, because he flipped off the crowd. Yeah, it was classic.
That might have happened. But even George, I mean, George, I give George. I mean, George has done so much with his body, and George is the best. He's. I mean, and a lot of those guys I still am in contact with. Whether I mean, it was cool to see him in college, see him in the pros, and now even still stay in contact with him. But George, I'll never forget. George was still really, fighting his weight and things like that, and he worked very hard that summer. And I mean, I'll never forget, especially in that game. Like, we're going into overtime, and he was struggling, but I'm like, dude, this is why you did all the work. No one's worked harder than you all summer long. I mean, and George was such a guy who could receive that, and he was so driven himself. But that, you just sense when a guy's feeling it, and I think that helped him. Obviously, we've talked about that a little bit to this day, but it's just amazing, the unseen hours that can come to light and things like that, and to get the reward. Because at the end of the day, I mean, none of this stuff is easy. Last I checked, the other team's always trying to win too. So there's always a winner. There's always
correctly, Tyler Hawes for you beat up BYU, had a big game.
Tyler Hawes, yeah. Like I said,
they had quite a few guys on that team that were
I
pretty
think Collinsworth was on that team as well, who had a nice little sprinkle of NBA. But I mean, just in general, I mean, that environment for our guys to go in there, especially early, to your point, there was a lot of young guys too, and then a blend of it was just it was a big win for those. That also, God, one of my favorite wins at Iowa State was that year also was against Michigan. If you guys remember, at home.
One.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Great one.
Dick
Johnny
Patel,
Orr there.
Yep,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and,
great game.
For me, obviously, I mean, no one really cares about me. It's about Fred. It's about those other guys. But for me,
don't say that.
for me growing up, I like I said, I mean, Section 9, we were 13 rows up. It was in a corner. They don't have Section 9 anymore.
Sure,
but if you can imagine across from the opponent bench and up to the right, that's the corner that I went with my dad. So like seeing Johnny Orr from that distance, and then that was, really the first time that I ever saw Johnny in person was as he came out. I should say that close. I shouldn't say exactly, but it felt like, you're seeing the legend right there in front of you, and all of a sudden he's, walking right past you with all the fanfare. And Michigan had just come off of the Trey Burke Michigan year, and they were loaded. And
Mitch McGarry, and trying to think who else was on that team.
Glenn Robinson. Well, Karis LeVert's pretty good too.
Was Tim Hardaway on that one?
Tim Hardaway Jr. was on the team before. This was Glenn Robinson the third. Karis LeVert's the biggest name. They had another freshman, Nick Irvin. They had Spike Albright. They had Derek Walton, which was a big game within the game because Derek Walton and Monte Morris were high school rivals and all that fun stuff. Mitch McGarry had a back deal, and there was a question if he was going to play.
He was
or
on the
not
bike
play.
a lot that game because I sat in the student section right next to the opposing bench and right in the corner next to the bench.
Yep.
He was always on that bike the whole game, so we were razzing him a little bit when he went back to the bike. Yeah.
And actually, I think Nick Stauskas was also one of the bigger names on that team too.
Yep.
So there was, and Fred recruited him very hard. I later came to find out. So there was all these like different subplots within the game as well too. And I mean, they were ranked high. I think we were ranked pretty high at this stage. And didn't Dick Vitale do that game too?
Dickie V was at that game because that was a game that we had played at Michigan like a long time before that. Like I think it was like when Craig Brackens was here, like 2008, 2009, somewhere in there.
Did Fred take the Royce team there? Because I thought one of his coach team either played in Auburn Hills or not. But anyways, you guys.
I don't think they played at. I think because the Michigan game was like a long time before that, and it was supposed to be at home and home. They just never played the game in Ames for some reason. And then that was kind of the second part of that home and home that finally happened.
But anyways, that was like probably for me, that was a very big, like this is pretty cool moment as far as,
Yeah.
going up to Iowa State. I do shoot the very first game, I think, was an exhibition game against Augustana. And what was unique about that is they had a player, Daniel Jansen, who later was like the player of the year, I think, in NAIA. But I had coached against him when I was at Spirit Lake. So it's just weird how sometimes connections can come up. So
Yeah. That Michigan game, that was college basketball. I mean, that was like, if you're like trying to describe college basketball, like the best, like college basketball at its best, like that game was one that you can look to. Is like, it's two high ranked team. It's it's Dickie V on the sideline. It's got an old, a legendary coach coming in. One of the best environments in college basketball against two really, with two really good teams. You got the angle with like Monte Morris and Derek Walton. You got the former high school rivals. Like, it's kind of, that was a pure college basketball night.
Well, it was all those, throw in the Diamond Head Classic. There was, I mean, that was a fun game. And like on Christmas Eve or something like that, we beat Boise State, who had a very nice team and things like that. But anyways, I mean, you take those tests. Now I'm kind of trying to remember, that year would have been Iowa at home, which was George, the up and under one. It wasn't the Kiss. The next year was a Kiss. I was a part of the Kiss the next
15,
year. So.
Yeah, 15 was the Kiss. Yeah.
But George hit a huge bucket late against Iowa, and I think McCabe missed a three at the buzzer or something like that. But again, that was just that was a heck of a run to run the table there. And then, the other thing I remember about that season too is that, all those Big 12, especially home games, were just huge. If you I mean, it seemed like there was numerous top 10 matchups from Kansas at home, which we didn't beat, but yet the Texas at home, the Oklahoma at home, it was just,
they all felt big.
It was, and it was big, and some of them got bigger and all that fun stuff. Shoot, I mean, in some ways, well, it wasn't that year. The next year, I remember we struggled a little bit with TCU at home because they were not great those years, but everybody else, it seemed like, was just really loaded, and it was a dogfight every night.
Well, the Big 12 hasn't changed. So.
Well, I could actually contend that it has changed just in members alone, but we can talk about realignment.
We can.
It's amazing. It's amazing to me that 1 year ago, I mean, just in general, the whole college landscape. But yes, I mean,
what's changed in just the last calendar year is
it's amazing. And that's what's been a little bit unique for me is, like, obviously, I have history on a lot of levels, but shoot, I mean, I'm old enough, young enough to remember the old Big 8 days. So going from Big 8, being at Nebraska now, that's, that, but even we're Big 10 now, but just the way everything is changing, it's just wild to see how things are turning. And shoot, with Big 12, I have connections to Central Florida because that was in Conference USA. So it's just interesting to see how everything is blending together. Whereas
now
also
BYU is a conference game, so we can play.
There's a conference, and then
I'm sure that they'll welcome us back.
I'm sure it'll
open
be fun.
arms.
For us, being at Nebraska, we were the furthest western school by far, and now all of a sudden, geographically, we're split right in the middle between
you looking forward to the trip to LA for
and
that,
Rutgers. I like LA, so
yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think that the one thing I will say, and this is, the Jets are a little faster in the NBA. I'm not going to lie, but you get used to it. I was fortunate enough in my time in the league to get to travel to a lot of different places. So that was one of there was a lot of cool things in my time in the NBA, but I'd never been to LA until I was with the Bulls. So it's not like it's this foreign place that me growing up in Iowa. I mean,
sure. Yeah.
You just don't, you don't get too far away. And like I said, Colorado back in the day seemed like it was on a different planet, much less some of these other places. So now I have a little bit different spectrum as far as what's far and not far. Now I still trying to commercial in today's day and age and how that travel is all going to work. But the good news is that's all above my pay scale, so they can figure that all
show
out.
Up. You just got to show up on time.
Yep, exactly. So
we we should talk about that second year though, that 14-15 team, because that was a whole nother deal, where you have Jameel McKay and Bryce DeJean-Jones and Abdul Nader and then and then eventually the UAB game and all this. That was a whole nother kind of book in itself. That was a whole deal in itself. I guess I don't know.
Yeah,
I wanted to get your perspective on that season.
God, getting older because things are running together. So now it's what were things that stand out? The Iowa game at Iowa, I think, and I'll speak a little bit personally too, because I had never coached against Iowa in Carver. I had actually, believe it or not, coached in Harvard or at Carver with Coach Eustace when I was at Southern Miss. And this is I'm gonna tangent a little bit. So imagine this. So Coach obviously gets fired from Iowa State. Obviously it's controversial, all that fun stuff. So I get to Southern Miss. Well, they had already done a contract before we had gotten there to be in Iowa's whatever holiday classic, where a Friday night,
the Hawkeye Challenge.
Yeah, we were supposed to play UNC Greensboro, and I was supposed to play Centenary, and then the winners were supposed to play on Saturday. So so we play UNC Greensboro, and even in warm-ups and everything, this is when I knew it was maybe a little too soon, just with everything. I mean, for our bootleg game, we're already getting heckled by Iowa's fans and all that. I mean, at Southern Miss, and they're going at Larry and everything. And this was like probably game 3 or 4 on the season. So it was still pretty fresh in the year. Yeah. So, but the crazy part is can you name who the head coach was at UNC Greensboro?
UNC Greensboro.
Yeah, 5 seconds. 5, 4.
Does it have an Iowa connection?
3, 2, 1. Fran McCaffrey.
Really?
Really?
So
interesting.
Pretty crazy there. So I mean,
was he also red in the face and yelling all the time?
When you're with Coach Eustace, you're pretty locked into your
that's
so
that's
there
pretty
was
fair.
not.
That's
I
fair.
don't. I was locked into transition defense and rebounding the ball, so I wasn't too worried about the other coach.
Fair enough.
But we actually end up losing that game, and it's probably for the better that we did lose it, and then we played Centenary the next night, because I think that would have been interesting at least.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
All right, I got to go another random one. So here's one for you
guys. Keep going.
So my very first game. This is great. I can bounce around it for you all night. So my very first game at Southern Miss, we were playing Southeast Louisiana. Can you name not only one player with Iowa State ties, but one coach that would have been a part of that game?
Southeast Louisiana.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Floyd.
Assistant coach Steve Prohm.
Interesting.
Walk-on player Neil Berry.
Huh.
So pretty crazy there. So that was actually my very first game. Southeast Louisiana had been in the tournament the year before, and we played them at home at Reed Green Coliseum. So Steve, so I'll break off on Steve, and we'll get back to that second Iowa State season possibly, or my time will be in one or the other.
I think if I remember correctly too, Steve Prohm started as a GA at Centenary, if I remember correctly.
You could be right. I know he was a manager at Alabama, and actually, so went to school at the University of Alabama, was a manager at Alabama.
Right.
And one of the players was a guy named Roy Rogers, who in my last year in the Chicago Bulls was an assistant coach with me with the Bulls.
There you go. 98-99, Steve Prohm, assistant at Centenary.
There you go. Good on Centenary. So we go back. So after Southeast Louisiana, actually, Prohm becomes an assistant at Tulane. I'm at Southern Miss, so we're in the same league. So I actually got to know Prohm pretty good. He recruited a kid out of Jackson that I liked, Kevin Sims. Well, then he goes back with Billy Kennedy again at Murray State. And I'm recruiting a kid out of Biloxi, Mississippi named Isaiah Cannon. And if you know anything about Prom's run at Murray State.
That's part of the deal.
Isaiah Cannon
Mhm.
about
He is part of the
Yep.
canon.
is probably the reason that Steve Prohm got the job at Iowa State. I mean, it was a big
him and Cameron Payne.
him and Cameron Payne, which I coached in the NBA and in the G League. So thanks for bringing that up as well. We got all these connections. But anyways, so here's my Isaiah Cannon story. This is how crazy this world is. Isaiah, and his nickname is Sip because he's from Mississippi, calls me the night before signing day and he wants to sign the next day. I mean, so what the problem was, Coach Eustace wanted one guy, one of our other assistants wanted the other guy, and I wanted Isaiah Cannon, and so we didn't go on any of them. So like literally the night before signing day, Sip's like, Coach, what's the deal? I want to go. I want to sign with you guys. You're 58 miles from our campus. Like, he liked some of our guys. I'm like, Isaiah, you need to wait. I got to get you, Coach, to see you again a couple times during the year, and we'll sign you in the spring. He's like, Coach, I can't wait. Murray State wants to sign me, all this stuff, but I want to come to you guys. I'm like, Isaiah, just wait. Everything will be all right. Sure enough, the next day he signs. He signs with Prohm as an assistant, and then Prohm gets the job after that. And then shoot, what did he do? Wasn't he like 30-0 or something like that for a while?
Something like that. Yeah.
After I left, so I was there for Coach Eustace.
Out of curiosity, were the other two guys?
No, not good.
Did not become.
I'm not going to name it. No,
that's okay. I wasn't asking for names. I just didn't.
Well, so this is what two things about Sip is like. So I was with Larry 6 of his 8 years. The year after that, I went back to Iowa to coach. Coach Eustace Southern Miss played Murray State in like some Great Alaskan tournament, and Isaiah went off against Southern Miss. So I mean, Classic. It was like he got a little revenge there. And then the next time I saw Isaiah, he was in the NBA playing for the Sixers, and I went up to shake his hand before the game. He's like, Coach, what's up, man? I wanted to go to Southern Miss. I was like, dude, I wanted you to come to Southern Miss too. So it's just crazy. And then I got a chance to actually coach Isaiah with the Bulls. So it's crazy. So anyways,
time's a flat circle. It's fine.
That's yeah, exactly. That second year though, so that was at that time my first time coaching for Iowa State against Iowa and Carver. So that was a heck of a game. That was an emotional thing. Bryce had gotten in a little bit of trouble, if you remember all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. So we had some stuff going on, and I'll just stop there. So you know what I mean. So, but we go there and we get a huge win. George blows a kiss. It was a lot of fun. So that was cool.
Was that the year where Naz hit a 3 at the end of the first half?
Yeah,
there's a screenshot out there somewhere of him like flexing.
Yeah, he's like doing this thing, and then Fran's just like he's just grumpy Gus in the background.
Yeah, no, it was he did get it going, especially in that one.
Classic. I think Abdul Nader had a good game that game.
Abdul played really, Abdul had kind of an up and down year that year, but there was a few games, especially he played really big. One was that one. The other one was at West Virginia, like I talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah.
He just really played well. Now, the one that sticks out,
Cincinnati that year where we hit the game. Was that the year before?
Nope, that was the next year after I was gone in the NBA.
Yep, you're right.
So,
yep.
But the one that was the big game that year or non-conference was Arkansas at home. If you remember, Bobby Portis, who I later coached, I later gave a lot of crap to every time we talked about it. So, because I don't know if you guys remember, but Bobby did not miss in the first half. Like he went off. Like Arkansas was good. It was a big game. I remember watching film preparing for them, and it was like, holy cow, these guys got some dudes. They played well, but as you know, we were running, and not many teams would run with us. When Fred was there, and they decided to run with us, and we ran them out of the gym. Bryce had 30 that game, and I don't think he missed.
He went 8 for 8 from the field.
He had a huge dunk there in the second half too on that fast break.
It was no, that was and Bobby finally chilled out a little bit in the second half, and we pulled away. So that was that one sticks out especially to me. I'm not going to bring up that last game of that year. You already did it once. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, but good. That was the only time. That's the only time I was going to bring it up. Was just like
we're moving
that also
off
happened
of that.
This year.
I'm not bringing that one up, so that's on you. But that Big 12 tourney run Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Big 12 run. Say it one more time. I'm out on that. The Big 12 run, if you remember, I mean, shoot, Monte hits the game winner against Texas, and then
Texas, yeah.
Spangler, airbanks
Classic.
the layup at the end of the
Spangler
game.
still
Otherwise,
sucks.
Right.
yeah.
Spangler still sucks, man.
And then
The worst
I mean, the
tattoo I've ever
Kansas
seen.
game, I mean, that was Bryce played really, really well that
Yeah.
game, and I thought Abdul, that was it, kind of the other one where they really played. But Bryce, by that time, Bryce I think was coming off the bench and all that, but he played really, really good in that Kansas game. And I mean, again, that Kansas team had Wayne Selden, Kelly Oubre, Devontae Graham, stuff like that.
Did that have? I'm trying to think. Was Thomas Robinson on that game?
Nope. Thomas Robinson was earlier. So
Yeah,
my 2 years of Kansas, the first year was Nadir Tharp, Wayne Selden, who I later coached with the Bulls, Andrew Wiggins, Perry Ellis, Joel Embiid, and Tariq Black coming off the bench.
Yeah, that's.
And see, we had lost both of those first 2 games during the year, but the George Bloody Eye game, that third game, Joel did not play, and that's the game that in the Big 12 tournament run the year before. Yeah, because
Embiid was out with a back injury or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yep. And then the next year was Devontae Graham, who I later had in pre-draft workouts. Selden was still there. Kelly Oubre, Svi Mikhailuk, who's in the NBA too.
Wasn't Frank Mason on that team?
Frank Mason
and Devontae Graham were the 2 guards, and then you still had Perry, and then they had Cliff Alexander.
I think they still have Perry, if I remember correctly.
He might, I think he's back coaching with them. But,
he's taking his COVID year.
It was Landon Lucas?
Landon Lucas, and
was
then
he that year or was he later?
Landon Lucas, I think, was the second year.
Was Jeff Withy still on that team?
Nope, absolutely not. That was the year before.
Okay.
That was the year before I got there. That was I was at that game the year before. I was coaching high school, but that's the game, it was a heck of a game at Hilton where it was kind of the controversial call late.
Large, yeah.
Large version too. Yeah.
And Corey Lucius played really good.
Corey Lucius
for Iowa State.
He's a guy that gets underappreciated. I mean, he was before you, but I've always thought he was a guy that kind of got underappreciated a little bit.
Yeah, I can't speak on him. I don't know Corey, but
exactly.
I did watch him. But no, I that game especially, he really played well.
Yeah.
The guy I didn't coach that actually is kind of that I did get to know was cool from that team was Tyrus McGee, though.
Tyrus is the best.
He stayed that summer. I had this knack for running camps. So my first job as a GA for Fred was to run his camp, which camp at Iowa State when Fred was there was an absolute machine, man. I mean, it was 400 day campers. It was 250 shooting camp, 250 father son, and then team camp. But Tyrus stayed that off season, so I got to know Tyrus pretty well and things like that. So I've always had a good vibe when it comes to Tyrus.
Another guy off those teams that has turned an excellent pro career and still going.
Absolutely, yeah. He's playing with the Aftershocks team, right? And,
he's playing in the
stuff.
TBT right now. But he's had an excellent career in Europe.
Yep.
He's turned into a really phenomenal player.
I think that's about it as far as my that 2-year span. We didn't talk any Iowa State football, which is a little disappointing on your guys' end. But
we can talk Iowa State football.
Yeah.
No, we got like 2 minutes. I see here.
Hey, we can go as long as you want to.
Say we got time, man.
Yeah.
I got practice tomorrow, so we gotta get
fair
to bed.
Fair enough.
So, but
that's fair. So,
anyways,
well, Aiden, you got anything else for him? We can probably about wrap her up.
Yeah, I had a list of questions, but you answered about all of them. So
I don't know if
Just
that's
cook
good or
right
bad.
Yeah.
Did you like it, or was that straight pontification on my part?
You're
good with
That
it?
was great.
That was great. Yeah, that was great. There's sometimes where like where the guest doesn't like you have to ask the right questions to kind of get him going a little bit, but never before be like, this is Nate, and you're just like 45 minutes.
Yeah. There was a lot of Iowa State in there that I figured you guys would be a little pertinent for your run.
Well, the couple years right there, those couple years or whatever were like tremendously interesting seasons, like just from all angles, from just on the court stuff, any of the off the court, anything surrounding it. Even just those couple seasons there or whatever, like they're fascinating seasons in the history of Iowa State basketball.
It was a good group. It was a fun group to be a part of, and
Yeah.
those guys are still doing well, obviously, and on a lot of levels.
I
And
mean, pretty much most of that team went pro in either in Europe or in the NBA. So
and you know, even on a personal and a professional level, obviously, I'm still with Fred to this day, and
Right.
you know, I get to be, you know, it's not very often that your boss is your friend too, and things like
is
that.
Fred as chill all the time as he seems like he is?
You know, he's a world-class human. I will say this, like he he's competitive. That's the one thing. You know, the chill part, all that, like he's calm, he's in the moment, he understands what that looks like. But I think because he's not hooting and hollering, that doesn't mean that he's not as competitive
Right.
as
Yeah.
any of the other guys. You know, I worked with a guy,
Just super
Larry
locked in,
Eustace, who
kinda.
was really all over the place and coached a one way and was one style, and in my opinion doesn't get credit for the teacher he was. And then Fred, who's super innovative, super smart, all those things, at the end of the day is also super competitive and wants to, and in their own way they've both been extremely successful, and I feel very fortunate that I've gotten to work with both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Aiden, you want to wrap her up?
Yeah, that was a great show. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Nate. That was great.
This was a nice little talk about Iowa State basketball for an hour. So
Yeah.
a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
We're gonna end up pretty much talking football for the next 4 months, so it's nice to sneak some basketball in there before.
I've got plenty of football stories, but we'll save that maybe for another time.
We'll do a follow-up episode.
My dog growing up was named Blaze after Blaze Bryant, so that tells you a little bit of that. She lived to be 19 years old, so there's definitely some stories in there. We don't have time for that. Like I said, I got to get to bed, so
we'll get them from you another time.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate
it.
Yep.
Thank you, Nate.
Yep.
For Coach Nate Loenser, Levi Stevenson, I'm Aiden Wyatt. Go Cyclones.